Hello and welcome to yet another exciting program. I can hear the drum roll in the background, and it's going to be actually a very good show. Talking to David Richards shortly, not about Welsh singing, but about some terrible things, which could be Welsh singing, by the way. Now, stop laughing in the background. Just calm down. I'm just going to. We're going to play a video shortly from Dr. Paul Marrick, but I want to talk about the COVID-19 shot and cancer suppression on a review. Now, it's a sad story that indicates we have not left the dark days of COVID censorship. Just a sidebar here. Scrolling through news.com.au, there was a video there, and more information for those not even hit 50 about COVID and why you should get the vaccine. And it was sponsored by Pfizer. So I would probably keep well away from that. Now, the peer-reviewed paper published in January 3, just recently in the magazine or the publication called OncoTarget, reviewed 69 global studies and documented 333 cases of new or rapidly progressing cancer following COVID vaccination. Just as the bombshell study went live, the journal's website was mysteriously taken offline by a cyber attack. Ongoing cyber attacks are preventing access to the largest COVID-19 vaccine cancer study ever conducted. Now, this gets even more interesting. What a great film this would make. The authors of the paper have been attacked, personally attacked, and then it got stranger. A Pfizer headhunter, I want your head, and the rest of you too, contacted the study's co-author, Dr. Wafik El-Deiry, praising his credentials and offering senior roles at the company. If you were a policeman in England, you'd say hello, hello, hello. He rejected the outreach and went public, calling it ironic and doubling down on the urgent need to investigate vaccine safety. And there's an urgent need. I don't see government doing a whole lot about that. The good thing is this blackout has backfired. Instead of silencing the findings, it triggered a worldwide surge of interest. PDFs, links, and screenshots have gone viral. However, the fact remains that malignant censorship of science is still happening despite reforms to scientific publications. Even more worrying is why, despite the research, the shots are still on the market and the regulatory agencies have not themselves been brought to account for negligence. In this sec, we'll talk with Professor David Richards, physician scientist, co-founder and singer of Australians for Science and Freedom. But first of all, we'll go into a video. This is a short video from Paul Marrick, and then we'll discuss that and maybe also the video we played just prior with Simone Gold.
Hi, my name is Dr. Paul Marrick. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of the IMA, and we're going to discuss today a very interesting paper that has got a lot of public attention. So the title of the paper is called COVID Vaccination and Post-Infection Cancer Signals, Evaluating Patterns and Potential Biological Mechanisms. The two authors are Charlotte Kupavasa and Wafik El-Deiry. This paper comes from both the University of Tufts as well as Brown University. This paper was looking at basically a narrative hypothesis generating review, looking at the temporal association between COVID-19 vaccination and SARS infection and epidemiological data on cancer. So they performed a review from January 2020 to April 25 across multiple databases and web sources to collect reports of cancer appearing after COVID-19 vaccination and infection. So they found 69 publications, 66 article-level clinical reports, and this included 333 patients in 27 countries, and which included 2 large population-level cohort studies. So what did they find? Well, so they were looking for infection, post-infection, and post-vaccination. It just so happened that 87 or 89% of the cancers were post-vaccination. So that's important. The people are going to spin this as a consequence of SARS-CoV-2 infection, whereas indeed it was the vast majority of cases were post-vaccination. And so out of these 333 cases, what did they find? Well, the cancer types were hematological, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cutaneous lymphoma, leukemias. In terms of solid tumors, breast, lung, melanoma, sarcoma, pancreatic cancer, glioblastoma. Surprisingly, there were many cases of pancreatic cancer, predominantly in the solid tumors. And there was a certain pattern associated with these tumors. And this has been reported before in studies on so-called turbo cancers. In our paper on turbo cancers, we similarly reported a similar pattern. And so what they found was rapid progression of the tumors, recurrence or reawakening of previously indolent or controlled cancers, tumors occurring close to the injection site, and in terms of time, there was a clustering within weeks to months of vaccination. So this becomes important because in the Korean study, which looked at over 8 million patients or 8 million citizens vaccinated versus non-vaccinated, they looked at the hazard ratio of cancer in the first year. And the biggest criticism of oncologists is cancer doesn't happen in a year. The lead time is years, which is obviously not correct for cancers associated with the vaccine, because in this study, as in multiple other studies, there was a clustering within weeks to months after the vaccine. So what happened when this paper was published? Well, as would be expected, Big Pharma wasn't happy. So some unknown agent tried to shut down the journal. There was a cyber attack on the journal, and they successfully shut down the journal due to the cyber attack. So apparently the FBI have been involved. And then it generated an enormous firestorm in social media, attacking both the authors, but particularly Dr. El-Deiry, attacking him personally, his competence, and basically undermining his integrity. And he did fight back. So it seemed like there was a concerted, organized, well-orchestrated attempt to shut down the journal, shut down the paper, and prevent the paper being distributed. But in fact, it's had the opposite effect. Because of all the publicity and because of all the attention, all the social media, this paper has now been widely distributed across the world. This attempt to hide the data has now completely backfired, and the results of this paper, which obviously been reproduced multiple times and obviously accurate, have been distributed. What is even more interesting is the second author, who's one of the oncologists been communicating, Dr. Wafik El-Deiry. He actually got a job offer from Pfizer. Now, can you imagine such a thing so preposterous? He writes a paper highly critical of their vaccine and the enormous toxicity resulting from their vaccine, and Pfizer has the audacity to sincerely offer him a job. You can't make this up. And so this is another example of when true science results in data that's inconvenient to Big Pharma, and Big Pharma tries to shut them down. So clearly, cancer.
So there you are. It's all very interesting. That was Dr. Paul Marrick. My guest is Professor or Doctor or just David Richards. Dave, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure, Mike. It's lovely to see you.
Yes, it is. And I appreciate that it's lovely to see me. So I'm just being stupid. I owe you a beer too, so I'm doing this under some duress. That's a very disturbing report, isn't it? And to see that the cyber attacks and the desire to hide it, to offer one of the researchers a job with Pfizer. And they're still pushing it. And I saw on news.com.au today, go and get your Pfizer jabbed. Of course, it was sponsored by Pfizer and supported entirely by news.com.au, which is the Murdoch media conglomerate. What's your thoughts on that video? And of Paul Marrick too. I think he has enormous credibility.
Yeah, I think he came across very well. I thought that it was a very balanced communication, and I guess what I would say is that this just reinforces a pattern of behavior that we've seen over the last 5 years, where data has been largely hidden from view from most doctors and most clinicians, and when someone does try to put together some cogent information regarding the safety and the efficacy of these vaccines, they seem to come under attack. And this is extraordinary pattern of behavior which I've never experienced in my 40 years in clinical care. Most of the years I've worked, if there's any kind of uncertainty, that uncertainty needs to be reduced. We need to understand what's going on. We need to share information. We need to take an unbiased, open view of the evidence that's before us, and act in the interest of the patients, the safety and the well-being of the patients. But the whole thing seems to be in reverse. That there's secrecy about the information. All attempts to garner information are treated as hostile, and instead of the onus of proof on the manufacturer demonstrating the safety of their product, it seems to be the other way around. The attitude of governments and public health seems to be that it's up to the patients and the people to prove that there's a problem with the vaccine. That's quite absurd. I mean, the null hypothesis is that doing nothing, any intervention has to do better than doing nothing, and we're not seeing that. We're not. The onus is being put on the researchers, on the patients, rather than the companies and the government to show that there's a safety signal here.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I looked at the one of the things here. It says the systematic review documenting COVID shot turbo cancer cases. Now that was across 27 countries. Showed that around 50% of the cancers occurred within the first couple of weeks of injection. Now, all this information that's coming out, it is disturbing. But if there was a normal 7 to 9 years, as normal protocol of testing these inverted commas vaccines out, this would have been discovered. Now, the other thing is Hedley Rees from the UK, and he says it's the supply chain problem too, and that a lot of these vaccines, he knows that they've been repurposed from, I think they came out about 2014, and they were deadly then. So obviously in Australia's case, for example, the UK, the authorities are failing their public miserably. What do you think about that terrible thing that I'm saying, that they're as guilty as hell, and they should all go and rot in it too?
Well, look, I think the first thing is it's hard to draw firm conclusions about those kind of cancer rates, because cancers generally take several years to emerge. And so the idea that they can happen quickly over a 2-week period, to support that idea, there needs to be some genuine mechanism for that, and that's not that's not forthcoming. But of course, the point is that the way in which we patrol the introduction of these medications is really weak. We have a passive reporting system in Australia. So I've done the statistics on this, and so probably for every one fatality in relation to a vaccination. I'm not saying in respect of causation or anything, but just simply by the numbers. For every one fatality, there's probably 10 others out there that are just not being recorded because the way in which we record our evidence is a passive system. We need to develop an active system to actually patrol these interactions much more active, with much more scrutiny, and that's just not forthcoming. The way in which the Australian Bureau of Statistics has approached this is, quite frankly, shameful. The way that they've handled the statistics, the way that they've literally, well, they'll call it smoothing the data. The way that they've smoothed the data it stretches the credibility to the extreme. And I mentioned to you a few weeks back that in 2022, the number of excess deaths that we saw in 22 exceeded the entire excess deaths during the Second World War, which is shocking. So at one level, this study raises more questions than it answers. I would be skeptical that these cancers were emerging 2 weeks after vaccination and put in causation in that respect down to the vaccines. However, what I would say is that the long-term effects of these vaccines in terms of carcinogenesis remains an open question. And we know mechanistically that when you have vaccines, mRNA vaccines, we know that they're contaminated with DNA fragments. That was by Kevin McKernan. He identified that. It's been supported by several laboratories around the world now. Fragmented DNA transfecting cells throughout the body is not a pretty situation because DNA's got a half-life of 500 years. So if that gets into the cytoplasm of a cell, then there's no machinery in the cytoplasm to remove that DNA. And so the DNA is going to stay there for a long, long time. And this is fragmented DNA, which we know is very hostile to protein metabolism in the cytoplasm. Just to explain this, Mike, every cell in the body, or virtually every cell in the body, has a nucleus. And that's where the DNA is contained. And the reason why the DNA is contained in the nucleus is it's separated from the rest of the cell so that the metabolic pathways remain discrete. Once you start blasting these cells with DNA, which then pollutes the entire structure of the cell, there's no natural mechanism to remove those quantities of DNA. And so the downstream effects are unquantifiable, never been studied, never even been contemplated that anyone would ever do this. It seems extraordinary. And, as clinicians and scientists, we need to be asking the questions, what is happening? And it's the onus is on governments and agencies to release this information openly so we can properly scrutinize exactly what's been going on.
I just want to take you up on one thing you said. You thought it was I think you said highly unlikely, or you doubt whether the cancers would have happened within that 2 to 4 weeks of injection. But it was a systematic review documenting COVID shot turbo cancer cases across 27 countries that showed that around 50% of the cancers occurred within that 2 to 4 weeks of injection. So that would clash with what you're saying. I just want before we give you a chance to have a reply, which I do that, nearly 50 publications have reported a temporal association between COVID-19 mRNA vaccination and the onset of cancer. Epidemiological studies, one from Italy, one from South Korea, have also described increased cancer incidence amongst COVID-vaccinated individuals compared to unvaccinated groups. That's part of the research, and they've 330 cases and 69 global studies. Now, dismissing them outright, the response from academia, the media, and by our regulatory agencies have been sounding very much like a Welsh choir. But they're very loud, but they're all out of tune with reality. That's my humble opinion. What would you say to what I've just thrown at you, David?
No, they're good points, Mike. They're good points, and I think that they deserve to be answered, fairly. Look, the first thing I would say is that these are observational studies, and they are prone to bias, Mike. And I'll illustrate that by talking about the Women's Health Initiative, which was done looking at the effect of HRT on mortality in perimenopausal women. It was such a observational study, and as a result of that bias, HRT was lambasted with accusations that it caused increased mortality, cancer rates, and so forth. After 20 years, finally we sorting the problem out, and when we've done unbiased studies, critical studies, it's shown that the HRT is broadly neutral in terms of mortality and cancer rates and so forth. So it created enormous stir, and we're a little bit like that with these kind of studies. These studies are, the patients because we're taking different studies in different countries. It's hard to standardize the information that you're getting. And these studies are easy to do. Universities love doing these studies because they're cheap. They can do them on their computers. They don't have to do any proper field work. But they are fraught with difficulties. Now, I've analyzed this space very carefully because, obviously I'm deeply concerned. Many of my family members, patients, relatives have all had some of these mRNA vaccines, and I'm deeply concerned as to what the implications are, and there are clear reasons why we should be concerned about DNA in the cytoplasm of the cell. For example, there's a pathway called cGAS-STING which regulates normal cell activity, and this study, we've discussed this with Kevin McKernan, and the presence of the cytoplasmic DNA we know destabilizes that pathway and is likely to really lead to increased rates of cancer. And my study of the dynamics suggests that it's going to take about 5 years to see whether those emergent effects are realized. Look, we shouldn't dismiss the study. The study is valid. We need to understand exactly what the study is saying, but it needs more research before we can really hang our hat on it. And that's why I say there are more questions than answers, because it's legitimate, Mike, that you asked that question. We need to say to the authorities, look, this data is out there. It needs to be properly analyzed. It may be biased, but we've got to have proper scientists, people who know what they're doing, analyzing this data for the sake of the health of the patients and all Australians.
Yeah, I think a lot more research, but here's the thing. Here's the kicker. If they followed protocols, it wouldn't have been released. But let's not worry about science. and that anybody who says otherwise, will the government, they will shut you down.
Absolutely. And that was shown by Jayanti Kundasanda, who studied the original papers and showed that there were more deaths in the Pfizer arm than there were in the control arm, and that information was suppressed. So we've had skullduggery in the way this data has been presented right from the beginning.
Who would think that Pfizer and those would be involved in was it skullduggery or skullbuggery?
Well,
Same.
you pick the flavor.
That's a terrible thing. Just watch out, someone tapping you on the shoulder. Just quickly, we have to go, but if somebody wants to find out more what your organisation is doing, that's Australians for Science and Freedom. How do they do that? And just you got yourself 30 seconds to tell us what's happening with this mob of fine people.
Well, we're fighting for clarity and transparency in scientific research in Australia. We're of civil rights in our country. We're constantly patrolling, the integrity of the data that that is available, and also trying to articulate for the rights and freedoms of Australian people. So our organisation is called Australians for Science and Freedom. We have a website, we have a presence on Facebook and X, and we have our annual conferences, we have annual monthly meetings. Please come and talk to us.
Professor, Doctor, or just David Richards, please do not sing. Thank you very much for your time. I've got to think of something else to rib you about. I mean, maybe we can get into your training for the World Championships.
Sure.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Otherwise, I'll get that terrible injection. Professor and Dr. David Richards, physician, scientist, and co-founder of Australians for Science and Freedom. Thank you very much for your time. Coming up next, we'll trip the light fantastic right here on The World Today.
Growing up, my father enjoyed a drink. It was just part of our culture. So you might have started drinking at 15 or 16, and so then it's just a slippery slope. As it affected me in the end, it was to the point where I couldn't even have money in my bank account because, I'd go to the pub or I'd go to the bottle-o. I started roofing in Sydney when I was about 20 years old. I had a crane come down on us. I jumped off the roof and the crane laid exactly down the line I was running. I could have ended up in a disability or life-threatening situation, and through that I developed PTSD. I medicated pretty heavily. I had a pretty pessimistic outlook on life. The glass was always half empty or whatever it was. You don't realise those things are impacting you so much. It's really hard to walk through the world. Depression and those negative feelings lead to thoughts that, you'd be better off not here. Suicidal thoughts are a terrible thing, You look at what you've given your family, you look at what you've taken away from your family. Dealing with that for extended periods of time and not talking to people about it is something that's probably taken a toll on me and my family that I didn't realise. My drinking got to a point where I was drinking in the mornings and, I had a job, and my boss told me, it wasn't good enough, and I was so lucky that, my boss took me to an AA meeting that night. When you walk into AA, it says on the wall, admit that you can't do this yourself anymore. The second thing is admit that you need God in your life. Having that written there and it just saying, try and turn to the Lord, I thought, well, rightio, now that's my chance. I met Robbie pretty early on. I sort of reached out to him and said, where do I go? And Robbie had been coming to the Salvation Army Church and he said, look, come with me. And we spent a lot of Sundays together. That was pivotal in what I'm doing now. I believe that I was brought here for a reason. I came into the church and I was lucky. There's just so many lovely people here. It's the community as well as the church. One of the members prayed for me. And I think it was in nearly that time that my PTSD was healed and I felt like I belonged in a way. Walking close to the Lord has helped me use my heart more through worshipping the Lord on my own and connecting and drawing him close enough so that he could literally heal me. But when I start to fathom how much healing, glory, there's enough for everyone because that's how it's written, it's never ending. One day after church, I was at home, had an opportunity to see the kids, and my littlest boy was there and he was 8. And he looked at me in a way that he'd never looked at me before in his whole life. That's because I was sort of talking to him differently. I was really lucky to have that moment and to see what could happen if I just keep doing the right things and keep walking with the light. That was something that was pretty amazing. I'm going through a bit of a hard season now, with work and things. I think all I can do is move forward positively, but I really look forward to a future where I can see my kids and my boys grow up. So I really look forward to these next years to live a calm, peaceful life.
What is Australia's deadliest predator? The one that hits with more than 30 Gs of force. Strikes in under a second. Leaves catastrophic injury in its wake. You won't hear it, you won't see it, not until it's too late. Australia's deadliest predator isn't found in the wild. It's on our roads. Speeding is the killer.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. Good morning for those in the UK or Europe. UK, you should have been probably out of the shower now, having your toast and Vegemite, we hope. For those in Australia, in New South Wales, you'll be just about getting home, hopefully. For those in Queensland, you'll be packing up your desk and putting away the ruler and pencils, getting ready to leave work. How old is that? It's disgusting, isn't it? That's what the oldies say, apparently. I don't say it at all. We've had a few torrid weeks in Australia, and the government and the major opposition party, the Liberal Party, revealed what many political observers already knew. Many of those in the Uni Party don't care for free speech, freedom of expression, or freedom of association. Our governments want the right to decide for you. For most people who are law-abiding, not racist, extremist, terrorist, many of the laws passed are just simply wrong. We already have laws that restrict hate speech and discrimination against groups. Now, Australian State Leader from New South Wales, Chris Minns, said recently, "We don't have the same freedom of speech laws that they have in the US. And the reason for that is we want to hold together a multicultural community." What's the US? That's not multicultural. It's got everyone that sounds like that, So it seems a multicultural community requires restrictions to free speech, and our free speech opportunities are granted by the government, according to Chris Minns. He knows all. Not something people are automatically entitled to. So you have to make sure the government says you have the right. We give you the blessing to say something. But if you say something that's not quite right, that we don't like, could be a bit hurty, well, we'll go after you. Federal police will be there. They'll come after you. The New South Wales police, forget crimes. Don't you say hurty words. Now, whose rights are the government protecting? One guy knows all about this and everything. Stephen Tripp is president of Australians for Better Government, vice president of Let's Rethink Renewables, and host of a magnificent, it was fantastic. When I was there, he got at least 6 people watching. I have that magnet, you see. Host of the Commanding the Narrative podcast. Stephen, thanks for joining me.
Good to see you, Mike, and hello to your audience.
Thank you very much. I was looking at the
I think we got more than 6.
No, they all ran away when they saw me. What's this guy doing on? He's opinionated, and I haven't got an agenda. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, you would find that too. You got to have that real agenda. You got to have that, almost walking in water, holes in your hand. I'm going to save humanity. Otherwise, people don't want to follow you. It's almost like a cult. Anyway, that's just my humble opinion, Stephen. What's your thoughts on first of all, Chris Minns? What's your thoughts on him? He's a beauty.
Look, unfortunately, here in New South Wales, it looks like we're going to be blessed with Chris Minns for quite some time, probably until he gets sick of being Premier and wants to go to Canberra and have a shot at Prime Minister. And some people even say he'd be a better Prime Minister than Anthony Albanese. But I'm here to tell you that Chris Minns is probably the worst leader that we've had in this country, because he is dismantling the fabric of what this country is meant to be all about. And he gets up there and says, I make no apologies that we have no free speech here in this country and it's not constitutionally protected as it is in the United States of America. Well, he's clearly showing that he doesn't understand what Australia is and how it was set up originally. Now, I want to go back to Sir Robert Menzies, who was a constitutional lawyer before he entered into politics. So you would think that he would know a lot about this whole subject. And he used to push back against having a Bill of Rights here in Australia. What a Bill of Rights is, as it is in America, I'm pretty sure it's about their first 6 amendments in their constitution. So it would be something that's enshrined in the constitution that the politicians then couldn't trust. And that's what he didn't like, because he believed in representative government, and he believed that the accountability that's put on the politicians in the parliament would be enough to keep the free speech protected in the country, and also common law. Common law and the parliament were there to protect free speech in this country, and it was a more fluid system than what he viewed would be, which was a system in America, which is having it constitutionally enshrined in your constitution, where the politicians don't get a say, the elected representatives don't get a say. The Bill of Rights is then ruled on by the judges that are unelected. So he wasn't saying that we don't need free speech in this country. It's just a different way of regulating it. Now, fast forward to 2026, you've got Chris Minns up there saying, "Oh, we don't have free speech in this country because it's not constitutionally enshrined." That doesn't mean that we don't have free speech. It's just a different system to protecting free speech. And the one thing that Robert Menzies tried to do was he tried to ban the Communist Party during that time as well. So again, here in 2026, we don't have a Bill of Rights, and we have communists and authoritarians running our governments, and that's why we're dealing with a lot of the issues that we are dealing with. And I just think that Chris Minns doesn't understand how we got to this point. It doesn't understand our history of free speech in this country. He doesn't understand why it's so important, and he's proving to be a massive fool by going up there in front of a camera and smiling with his nice little haircut and saying that we don't have free speech in this country. He's eroding the fabrics of this country and what makes this country so great.
What's your thoughts on the legislation that's passed? I mean, farmers, there's 2. They had to separate it. Farmers, they're obviously terrorists. They go shooting.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I won't go into that part. We'll be here all day. But the other bit, the hate speech stuff. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, people know my thoughts. I think it's a great way of shutting people up.
Look, I just want to touch on the guns because, again, it shows that these politicians are complete idiots. I mean, they're mainly based in the city. A lot of our electorates are in the city, and they don't understand what's going on in rural areas. Hey, I'm here on the northern beaches of the city. You can put myself in that basket as well. I had a friend, Katie McCallum, talking to me the other day. She's up in rural Queensland, and she was telling me about the bushfires that they were having, and farmers were going out and killing their sheep to put them out of their misery because of the fires. Now, they had about 32 farmers going out and killing hundreds of sheep. And if you know anything about shooting rifles, those rifles get hot. So they needed to cycle the rifles that they were using to cull these sheep. So they would need about 4 rifles each. But you have these politicians, Anthony Albanese in Canberra and Chris Minns in Macquarie Street in New South Wales. They wouldn't know that. They would have no idea that's a requirement of these farmers to do what they have to do at certain times. So suddenly you've got them saying, "Oh, we want to restrict your guns. We don't want you to have this many guns." They don't understand. They have no idea what they're talking about. So it goes to show that this is not fit to be making these rulings. When it comes to hate speech, Chris Minns is saying that he makes no apology for not having free speech in this country because he wants to live in this harmonious, multicultural society. I'm not here to bash multiculturalism, but you can't deny the point that if we are having to give up our free speech, everyday Australians are having to give up their free speech in this country, then multiculturalism has failed. You're bringing in people from different parts of the world that are in conflict with each other. That's the reason why we saw Bondi. There's no other if, buts, and maybes about it. You had two rival groups killing each other because of conflicts a world away. It had nothing to do with free speech, but the politicians want to aim it that way because they want to push through their own political agendas. They want people to shut up.
What's your views on the, we are running out of time, what's your views on the Liberal Party? I mean, mine are sort of dry-reaching. That's how I feel. I want to vomit when I see them because they definitely are not the old conservatives, free speech, your own rights, smaller government, that sort of garbage. They don't embrace that at all now. They're sort of like used to be Labor light. I think they've had the operation and now they are joined at the hips. Susan Lee, or once known as Susan Ley, do you think she'll last? And do you think the Libs will last? I see Pauline sort of ramping it up and climbing up in numbers.
It's funny. I was on YouTube last night actually, and an old documentary, a Four Corners episode about John Howard came up, and when he was leader of the Liberal Party back in the early '80s when Bob Hawke was first elected, and now a lot of the talk that they were talking about at the time was exactly what they're talking about now. The Liberals will never win again, and Labor's so strong, and they're ruling in every state and federal government across the country. So it feels like the Liberal Party, they haven't been in this. I mean, they've been in this situation before. They may be able to dig themselves out of it. The only difference this time is that you've got One Nation sitting there, and One Nation's been around for a very long time. Pauline Hanson's been around for 30 years. She's got that political collateral, and so is Barnaby. She's got Barnaby on board now. She's got a lot of good people underneath her in the party. And she may attract even more people at the upcoming election. So the polls are indicating that the Liberals are on the nose. I think it's no reason why. I've spent some time in the Liberal Party, and I actually interviewed Bernie Finn recently. Bernie Finn, of course, was expelled by the Liberal Party down in Victoria. And he said, if you haven't been kicked out of the Liberal Party, if you've been in for a number of years, you should be ashamed of yourself because the Liberal Party keep kicking good people out. And I think that's why they're in the mess they're in now, because I speak to people in the Liberal Party. I ask them the simple question: do you think the Liberal Party has been infiltrated by people that want to destroy the Liberal Party? And they all say yes. They all believe that the Liberals have been infiltrated by these moderates, or whatever you want to call them. And now you have people like Malcolm Turnbull talking about an alliance with the Teals and starting a new party with the Teals. So, look, it definitely seems like the Liberal Party is doomed. They may switch to Andrew Hastie, that may, rise them out of the ashes, or Jacinta Price or someone like that. But it's definitely not looking good at the moment. They don't have someone like John Howard to come along and save them this time. And they've got Pauline Hanson looming there with the One Nation Party that will make things very difficult for themselves.
I can see an ex, probably not colleague, but Shane Healy in the background when you mentioned Andrew Hastie. And I think the same thing. I think Andrew Hastie has become a pretty boy, and I'm speaking correctly. Just quickly, the One Nation, you've got about 40, 50 seconds on this. One Nation, if they get a few of the Conservatives that move over, a bit like Tories with Reform UK, One Nation could very well be the next, or become, first of all, the opposition, and then maybe squeeze it in for the next election. How do you think they will embrace Pauline Hanson, Prime Minister?
Well, firstly, she has to get in the lower house, even though the Prime Minister is not mentioned in the Constitution, so there's nothing to say that a senator can't be Prime Minister. But I do know that there are a lot of Liberals and Nationals, particularly the Nationals, that there are members of Parliament at the moment considering joining One Nation, and they are hesitant to do so because Pauline Hanson rules that party with an iron fist. If you read the One Nation Constitution, she has complete control over that party, and if you do one little thing wrong, she can kick you out straight away. So a lot of the politicians don't like that, because even though they are in the Liberal Party and they are in the National Party and things seem to be falling apart, there are a lot of safeguards and checks and balances within those two parties that don't exist in One Nation, so that's going to stop them from jumping across. You may see more like Barnaby, but at this stage, they're still very hesitant.
Now, if somebody wants to find out more about your activities, legally, of course, how do they find out about that? And quickly, the Commanding the Narrative, how can they watch and enjoy that?
Well, firstly, Australians for Better Government. We are not a political party. We exist to reform our system of government. We are non-partisan, so we don't lean into any particular party, but we want to change our system of government, which is generally pretty good. It just needs some tweaks to make it a lot better. And of course, Commanding the Narrative. If you want to head to commandingthenarrative.com, you'll find everything that I do there, podcasts, articles, and all the involvement that I have in Australians for Better Government and Let's Rethink Renewables and a lot of other things. We're doing an event in Dunedoo on the 1st of February with Stuart Bonds and Senator Sean Bell about the renewable projects out in the central west of Rana. So if you are listening in that area, please head to commandingthenarrative.com. Check out that event. We'd love to see you there.
And Stephen will buy you a beer, by the way.
Yes.
Terrible. Stephen Tripp, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
this
Mike.
is The World Today. Coming up next, folks, we have the protagonists, Bill Etheridge, Trevor Coult, and Shane Healy, and I am looking forward to this one very much indeed.